all of these movements and ideologies mean nothing if there's not structure to contain it.
Time is money, so spend yours listening to me talk about things that are important to me and my people.
Time is money.
Hello and welcome back to Series 8 of Maya's Minutes. We are with Dr. Amani and we are speaking on very heavy, very triggering topics which need to be spoken about. In the last few episodes, which I recommend you go back and listen to if you haven't already, we discussed sexual violence specifically in global majority groups. The last episode, we touched on how to pick up on signs that you might be seeing from people who you have a relationship with, either romantically, friendship or familial, and how you can also respond in an appropriate way when someone chooses to open up to you. We touched briefly last episode on how we can safeguard younger people, younger women specifically, from sexual violence. And that's definitely something we need to go into more.
Absolutely.
So where are we now?
When we think about like safeguarding, I guess like there's a way to think about it on like different levels.
Yeah,
right?
and I feel, sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
go
I
on.
feel like when we talk about safeguarding young women, our minds instantly go to policing young women.
Yeah.
Don't let them out. Don't let them wear this. Don't let them do anything. Don't let them attract a man. None of these, they're not allowed to do anything now.
Yeah.
So that's our idea of safeguarding. And I think that needs to be turned around to how we're teaching women to maybe even educate men. It shouldn't be another thing we have to do. It's another labour point, yes. But I can't rely on them to do it themselves, unfortunately. So I feel like it has to come from us. I don't know if it has to come from us from when we are children, but it definitely needs to come from the mothers. And when we are mothers, how we are raising our sons.
Absolutely.
And when we are aunties, when we are aunties not through blood, but friends of the mum and all of the community.
It has to be community.
It needs to be to safeguard our women, educating our men.
Yeah, absolutely. And raising people, women, girls and boys, to understand their bodies and relate better to people, understand consent, just as a standard thing. Do you know what I mean? It should just be ingrained in everybody. And like you said, it has to be the parents, it has to be like the aunties, it has to be the grandparents as much as possible. It has to be all the adults that are involved in that child's life.
But here's the spanner. So I don't know if you've seen the recent massive uptake on trad wives, traditional wives.
Nava Smith.
There you go.
Ballerina Farm.
There you go.
Yeah,
you know what I mean,
I'll be on TikTok.
All right. So I listened to the What Now podcast with Trevor Noah.
Okay.
And that episode where they speak about it gave me real insight. I didn't know about Ballerina Farm before that episode.
Okay.
But I do now. And actually this really stems from, like, the origins of trad wives stems from a strand of Christianity, evangelical,
right,
like something, and white supremacy is at the heart of it. Mormons is part of it as well. It's a lot about a woman in this trad wife sphere, the traditional, real deep ones. Her belief is that she is there to serve men and that all autonomy from her should be taken away. They're very pro-life. They don't believe women should be able to have abortions when they need to or want to. They think that men should be the ones who earn all the money and control where the money goes, and their only purpose is to serve a man. Now, a lot of the younger generation are really buying into this. Nara Smith is 22.
She's what?
The one on Instagram who does those videos
Lucky.
with Lucky.
She's 22. I actually didn't know how old she was.
22, born in 2001.
Hey. Okay.
So that's what I mean. This is the younger generation really taking in this stuff and thinking this is good. Now, I think, and as I said on that podcast, the younger generation are endorsing this because it's like they've watched the generation before them, millennials, us, do too much. We work, we study,
girl boss.
we have a girl boss complex. We have a relationship. The man isn't doing enough, but we're settling. Not me, a lot of just majority. Sorry, babe, love you. A lot of people are not happy in their relationships. Now a lot of us are also got to an age where men don't even want to settle down. it's just a jungle right now. And they're seeing that and they're saying, yeah, drop me out. And a lot of the girls are idolizing this life
Tough
at
life.
home, and they completely, but they're misinterpreting
what
it
that
as
is meant
soft
to be.
life.
Yeah.
It's not soft life. Where this really comes from is you're wanting to give away all power of yourself to everyone, and to not even to everyone, to men. And if those younger generation people who are loving this knew that, I think things would change quite quickly, because this younger generation is also the first who knows about their rights and how to get the things that they need for themselves and advocating for themselves better than any generation before us.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, I think that's another thing at play here. And this is when you said the reason I brought this up is because you said the adults in the boys' lives need to educate them. A lot of these trad wives, the deep ones, would have been homeschooled by very minimal education. Not saying that homeschool means minimal education, but the homeschooling that they would have had would have been only Bible study at a push.
Right.
They would have been conditioned and brought up to be married very early. Sadly, it's very similar to like arranged marriages that happen in the Asian culture, where women typically, this is like very traditionally, are not supposed to be that educated, because you're not going to be as desirable if you're educated and you've got a mouth and you can come back with opinions on that. So you're not going to be educated. You're going to be taught how to cook and clean and serve. And that's pretty much it. Your job is to procreate and serve your man. He can beat you, he can rape you, he can abuse you, but that's your job. And it's the same kind of sentiment. So that's why we then get these men as offspring who don't know any better. Because we're saying the women in your life need to teach you, and the women in your life that are teaching them just the wrong things.
Yeah.
So how do we get around that?
Yeah, no, it's shocking. And I think there is something about the generation and the generation below us seeing us and being like, do I want to do that? Same way we probably looked at our parents and be like, do we want to do that? Like, big side eyes.
Literally.
Fine,
Look
cool.
at us looking at them being like, you're in the same job for all these years. Yeah, I'm going to jump jobs. I'm going to have 7 in a week.
Yeah.
And now look at us.
And now we're doing up side hustles and this and that. And now everybody's saying that, no, I need community because we've been in this work culture too much. I just want one
job that I've been in for 3 years and I've got friends there.
There we go. So we're all shifting, but I think also the economy has something to play into it as well. But I think the thing is that we need to remember is all of these movements and ideologies mean nothing if there's not structure to contain it. So you have to have policies that allow for certain ideologies to take fruit. And right, so we as maybe millennials have been thinking about how we want to be girl bosses, for example, and we want to be able to work and be mothers.
Everything.
But then the maternity structures didn't allow for that. So then we're fighting against this war. The younger generation are like, you lot are fighting for what? I'm going to now revert into something that actually is allowed within the structures that exist. So being a stay-at-home mom, for example. And plus, trying to work all the time is exhausting. So maybe the alternative seems better. It seems like soft life. But what we don't realise is that potentially, without ideologies changing, we could then go back into what you're talking about, where you're just giving away your power. You're potentially, again, at worst being abused. At best, it's just not the best relationship it could be, So I think we need to think about how the two things can marry up. If we're talking about safeguarding, ideologies need to change, but also like policies and laws have to change to allow for those ideologies to like make sense, essentially. So that's why I said when we think about safeguarding, it has to be on every level. And I'm thinking like big, so like ideologies and how we go about defining societies. And then all the way down to like the individual, like parent-child relationship or like partner and partner relationship, and everything in between as well. It's a huge conversation.
Yeah, I think we touched on this in a previous episode because I said, what would you do to fix the, like, I think it was NHS or something. I said some big infrastructure. I said to you, what would you do to fix? But yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think it's so annoying how each of the, like every door you open leads to 7 more doors. And those 7 doors each have blockers that our people don't do. So like for what you're saying to take place, that means on a bigger structure, we need policies X, Y, and Z. That means we need to get someone in power who represents us and does this and whatever. In order for us to do that, we need to become more accustomed to voting, which a lot of us don't do. And then we need to become more accustomed to understanding politics and using it to wield the power that we have. That's also hard. Why is that hard? Because there's no one who looks like us in these rooms. Why is there no one? And you just go on and on and on and on and on. And this is why I feel like this podcast is so pivotal, because everything I speak about in this podcast is things that are typically inaccessible. Series 2 with Basayo, all we talk about is politics, and we put it in a way where you now understand why things are happening the way that they're happening. And I just think that more of this needs to be out there. And I'm not trying to just plug the podcast, but those things that are on the ground doing these kind of things and having these conversations. And because really and truly, all of this all of the changes we need are going to come from improved understanding and awareness. And that doesn't mean uni. That means life understanding and awareness, but it does mean picking up a book. It means reading. It means exploring. It means understanding things. And that isn't happening enough. There's not enough thought leadership, and there's not enough provocative conversations. But I don't mean provocative like sexualized, who's paying for the first date, would you take this, can your man do
controversial
this,
for the sake of it.
no. Provocative really means thought provocation. You're provoking thought now. That is what we need more of, and there just isn't that enough.
No.
Anyway, run over.
Exactly.
Right, so back to safeguarding. Like you said, it needs to start from a very grassroots, is what you're saying, infrastructure level.
Like, and all these things need to happen at the same time, but you just spoke about how that's really difficult and why that's really hard, right? But we do need to think about, like I said, like, okay, the individual kind of level. So that's us, really being engaged in our immediate environments. So your household, like, what is your family structure? What is your narrative that you want for your family? How do you want to raise your children? And what is the kind of things that you want them to know to be able to then go out and navigate the world? Because that's what you're doing when you're raising a child. You're just setting them up with all of the skills as much as possible to go out and navigate the world.
I think that's an important one to know. When you're raising a child, you're raising an adult.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that enough, especially in our cultures, does not happen, especially when it comes to men. There are man children all over the shop. It's
they need to know how to cook. They need to know how to clean. Like, it's just a human skill. Like, you have to, it's a life skill. It's not about whether you're a man or a woman.
And even something as basic as that, people don't realise how weaponised that becomes. If you can't cook and clean as a man, you now then, as a requirement, need a woman to do it for you, or your partners to do it for you. So that means you're like, that's a human need to be able to eat. So you're now going to take that as seriously as that. So now, if your woman isn't doing those things, you're going to put things in place to find one who is, or to potentially leave that one and cause pain and trauma by the result of that, all because you can't cook. So now you're seeking that, and then what trauma are you causing on the way? And that's something that people don't look at it in that way. Women just like, oh, well, it's okay, he'll learn eventually, it's all right. No, we need to be having a stronger hand on how we're raising our boys.
We need to raise them with, like, basic life skills, integrity, and, like I said, emotional regulation, being able to communicate, being able to relate to people. Like, all of these are the things that we need to be able to make healthier people and healthier generations, who hopefully can then engage in, like, sexual relationships in a way that's not abusive. Like, that's it. Like, that's all I'm asking is that, like, don't abuse people. Like, that's literally it when we say all this stuff. But I think it gets misconstrued. And
I think also people's definition of what abuse is. Sadly, I think there's a lot of examples of, in the previous episode where we were talking about if someone actually does come out and say to a friend or a family member or someone, this has happened to me, this is the sexual violence I've experienced, because their bar or their tolerance for sexual violence is so high, yours might not even make the cut. So then it's like, okay, we're trying to keep, like you're saying, run a home to our standards and whatever, but we need to define what our standards are appropriately. And I think that more also comes from keeping your ear to the street. And by that I mean, if you are a parent, you can never lose sight of what's happening in the society you're living in now. So even though back, for want of a better term, in your day, it was acceptable for men to rape their wives, which is so sad because a lot of our parents were alive and kicking in that time. Marital rape only became illegal in 96. I was born in 96. My parents were together 10 years before having me. So that's where they're coming from. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They need to be aware that that wasn't okay then, and it's definitely not okay now. And now it's illegal to even coerce a woman, which is sadly something that a lot of people from our parents' generations would have just taken as communication. Coercive behavior was just how they communicated. That's not okay now. So now if we know those things aren't okay, and this is a society that our kids are operating in, then we need to now take that in and teach accordingly.
Yeah. Keep your ear to the streets for sure, and know what's happening. That's why, again, say to parents that I work with as well, like, you got your kids scrolling on TikTok and you have no idea what's going on. It's like leaving them in a room with 1,000 people, like 1,000
Or
strangers.
just like loads of knives.
Yeah, we have to know what's going on. You have to keep your ear to the street. And I get it. As you get older, you start to think, oh, like, what they're interested in is stupid. Like, why would I be interested? No, be interested in what your kids are interested in, even if you don't think it is that interesting, because that's how you're going to know the tea. That's how you're going to know what's going on. That's how you're going to be able to, like, start to pick up flags and be like, actually, that's kind of not okay. Do you know what I mean?
I read Michelle Obama's book, and she speaks a lot about her mum, and she said that she didn't know until she became a mother that what her mum would do would be she'd arrange work so that she was able to always be there when they get home, and she would always be there. She would make sure they sit in the kitchen while she's preparing dinner or whatever. She wouldn't get involved, but she would let them speak to their friends, to each other the whole time, listening, so she could be aware of what's going on for them. And I think that's the biggest thing that happens now, because we do live such busy lives, and we just, but at the same time, that was busy for Michelle Obama's mum.
Yeah,
Do you know what I
sure.
mean? She
Yeah,
was
yeah,
busy,
that was busy,
but she prioritized that one thing. She made sure she was in the room, listening to them talk to their friends and whatever. And that alone just gave her the understanding. She said, now I've got daughters, I understand that she was doing that. It wasn't by accident we were always in the room when she was cooking. She was doing that on purpose so she could be aware. And I always feel like the best relationships of kids with their parents and the best understanding and safety of those kids is because the parents know.
Yeah, is exactly it. Like, just being available for your children, even if you're not involved in that conversation, like, just knowing that you're there and being interested. One of the main things that you can do, I think. I mean, I'm not a parent, but just from my understanding of that, like, my experiences at work, etc., those are the things that are just going to be like a huge safeguarding for your children. Just being aware, just being open, and as well, and if God forbid something does happen, even if you are around, you've built enough of a relationship with them that hopefully they feel like they can come and tell you. Again, it doesn't mean that they always will, but you're just increasing the chances. This is that's safeguarding, being there for your kids, being around, being a safe space, being interested in them, being curious about them, trying to understand them, not writing everything off as stupid or. And I get it. Like, we do have a narrative in our cultures like, oh, I'm not your friends. I'm not your age mate. Which is true to a degree. You still have to have boundaries.
100%.
You still have to have boundaries, and you still need to understand, like, there's a level of respect there, but don't
you are
do it
able
to the point.
do that. Yeah, this is what they don't understand. You're able for there to be that respectful boundary, whilst not cutting off the communication.
Exactly. Keep up the communication. Be interested in your kids. That's part of the safeguarding. And then, like, help them navigate, like, things in their own bodies. And like I said in a previous episode, teach your kids the real words for things and who is and who isn't allowed to touch certain things. You know, just be involved can be, like, a huge part of safeguarding.
Great. What does sexual violence recovery look like?
Sexual violence recovery, wow. So I always give this, I don't know if I've done it here. We did it in a previous episode when I talk about trauma and how to heal from it. And people tend to think, oh, it's something that just goes away. If I'm doing therapy with someone, trauma therapy, the idea isn't that, oh, well, it's going to go away. Unfortunately, I can't take away what's happened to you, but we can change how you relate to it or how it impacts you. So I'll give this analogy where, imagine now you've got your wardrobe, and you've got all your stuff, you've done your washing, and you're like, oh, I can't bother, I'm just going to put everything in. Throw everything in. And then it's like stuffed, isn't it? So you try and keep it closed, right?
Right, okay.
As soon as you try and just get some of your top out of the wardrobe, you just open it a little bit, everything starts to fall out, isn't it? Right, that's the trauma, right? Because you haven't processed it properly.
Right.
So the process of recovery or healing is taking all of that out.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk through the trauma and we're now reprocessing it.
Okay.
So we're now folding up the clothes and putting it
Okay.
back into the wardrobe.
Good analogy.
So the next time you go into the wardrobe, it's there, right? So the next time something triggers it,
Mhm.
you can see, oh, that thing is there, right? But now I know how to deal with it. Now I can see it. And I
And
know
now just that top is going to come out if I ask it to, if I want it to.
yes.
It's not going to come out with the top, the dress, the shoes, and everything
And it's not
else.
going to come, yeah. So all of that stuff coming out is that flood of trauma
Mm.
and the anxiety and maybe the flashbacks, maybe the nightmares and not being able to relate to people. All of that stuff is when it all comes flooding out. Now the next time there's a trigger and you open it up, I can see it, but I know how to deal with it. And it's just, yeah, that's that. Do you know what I mean? Like you said, it's just that top and it's that all that bit of trauma. That's what's happening right now, and I know how to deal with it. Yeah, so that's what recovery can look like. It's not going to go away, unfortunately. It always happened, and you know, I'm always like really sorry for people when I say that. Like, I'm sorry that I can't take this away, because people come to me and are like, I just wish this never happened. I wish I would never feel like this ever again. You will feel like this again, right? And that's with anything. Not when they, you know, people come with trauma, they come with anxiety, they come with depression. I never want to feel like this again. You will, because you're human. You will feel sad and you will feel anxious and you will be panicked. Yeah, it's how you relate to it and how you can manage it is what we're going to do now. So it can be a really long road, and I think especially for women that experience sexual violence, because the stats for those who actually seek help to be able to do that reprocessing or just talk to someone, even if it isn't a very processing kind of conversation, just to get some compassion from someone, is kind of low. So the stats are for white women, around 57% will seek help. Black women, 22%. Asian women, 17% ish, right? And then the definitions of help can vary as well. But that's small proportions. And those are only the ones that we know of.
Literally.
Right? So then there's the ones that haven't even reported it, right? So it's a tiny, tiny proportion of people that are ready to go and get that help at, I don't even know what point. In my research, there was a variation in how long it took from the actual incident to the point of seeking help. Some within like a year, some 10 years, right? So the rate of recovery can be different based on those things as well, like how long it takes for you to talk to someone about it. And then if you do decide to get professional help, how long that kind of therapy process is can also differ as well. Yeah.
Fair enough. No, that makes total sense. But I think the key thing there is about recovery. It is a trauma, and trauma recovery is like the analogy you said. And it is just something that you're going to have to work on. But I also feel like we need to normalize the sexual violence conversations. And I say that because I remember being in lockdown. You know, everyone was doing lives in lockdown. And I started doing them, obviously. And but I did them in like, I wasn't dancing on mine. I was like talking and having. To be fair, it was in lockdown that Myers Minutes concept came to me, when I was going to do like different series of focus of like one topic. And one of the ones I did was around sexual violence, and it started because I joined one which was going to be on that, and then I hosted one of my own. And the one that I joined, my friend had put me in touch with a person who had arranged it, and my friend has experienced big sexual violence. And I was like to her, are you going to talk? She was like, I wouldn't even know what to say. I wouldn't this, I wouldn't that. And I was like, you'd be one of the best people to speak on this. Absolutely, given your experiences. She was like, no, I can't, etc. So it's like, sexual violence is trauma, but we are now in a place where we're speaking about trauma. And we need to also include this in the conversation, because this is trauma. And I think we need to stop shying away from the conversation, because yes, it's triggering, but it's part of the reason it's so triggering is because we don't hear about it. So we need to talk about it more. And when we talk about it, the shame of it dissipates. Yes. Because we realise how many people have been through this. And we just empower ourselves, because we're not sitting with it on our own anymore. So I'm hesitant to be like, you know, yeah, we need to talk about it, but carefully and stuff like that. Because yeah, obviously, but whilst we normalise it, it's not going to be perfect. and we are going to make mistakes
Mhm.
and we are going to misspeak and say the wrong thing and whatever, but we need to allow room for that, because it's from doing that we then get it to a perfect science, where we have more language and we know more. Because, you know, like I bring this up in basically every series, but even the term coercion, me and my friends didn't know, and all of us were being coerced it to some degree by boys. All the boys when we were younger were trying to sleep with us, and they were using everything in the book. Oh, if you do that, then I know you're my girl. I know that you trust me, and I trust you, and I need to secure you. And yeah, but we're not going to. And obviously, I respect you, so I wouldn't make you do that. But you know, you need to do that. This is coercive. Can we do it? No. Can we do it? No. That is coercive. Like, these are things we didn't know. We didn't know that was, and no one was telling us. No, none of our mums were saying that's what coercion is, and that
and they didn't know, maybe.
Exactly. So it's not that term only came from how many women going on and on in casual conversations like this, being like, oh, you know, when he asks 10 times, you know, when he tries to use that as the reason, you know, when he tries to weapon. And then over time, we then realize, okay, this is happening to so many people. We're going to have to slap a term on this. And now we have it. So yes, we need to be mindful when we're having the conversation around sexual violence, but we also need to have it, and we can't let mindfulness get in the way of us having it, I think.
I agree.
Okay, good.
No, I agree. No, I think you have to say the words. I think we do tiptoe around some of it, and I think you have to say the words. You have to put the words out there so people get the language, and that people then can start clicking, oh, wait, was that my experience? And that can be an overwhelming thing to happen to someone for them to realize that, but it could potentially start their recovery.
I totally agree. 100%. And I come back to the example of TV as well. Like, it's only in the last few years we're
I May
seeing.
Destroy You.
It was exactly what I was thinking
It
of.
was a huge one.
That was a massive one.
Yeah.
Very, very hard to watch.
Yeah, it was.
But so crucial.
Yeah. Baby
Reindeer. I saw him in the gym the other day. I didn't say hello. But regardless, that, again, series. And that series in particular, I feel like the reason that was so hard hitting was because it was a male. Which is upsetting, because we've almost become desensitized to female sexual violence, and because it's a man, this one was just, and that's not taking anything away from it. It was a brilliant piece of work, but we can't lose sight of that. We need to be aware that these TV programs and these things, they are supposed to elicit conversation, and they're doing a good job of that, and I'm so happy, and that's what gives me hope that this generation, etc. But we need to carry on the conversation.
Yeah, and you're right, it does need to be as shocking when it's a woman. It, like, the fact that it isn't shocking, I think, is a bit of a flag to people. Like, why isn't this shocking anymore? That's so normalized and expected as part of our experience, which then means when you speak up, people are looking at you sideways, because it's like, oh yeah, like, that's normal, isn't it? That's how we interact with people. Or we'll say things like, no, I still get like, now I'm getting kids telling me, oh, they said he's mean to me because he likes me. I'm still getting little girls telling me that at work. Like, is that still a narrative that we're keeping up? That this guy is mean to, and then like that might plant. Luckily, some of them, well, most of them that I work with are like, no, I don't think he likes me, which is good. But imagine if that planted the seed for them to be like,
this is how a man treats you.
That's how okay, so if someone's mean to me, then he must like me. If he's really jealous, he must like me. If he's really possessive, it means he likes me, cares about me. I don't think we realize how these seeds grow. And it comes from the fact that it's just not shocking when we hear these things anymore. It becomes normalized.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think unless we recognize that sexual violence is another trauma as other traumas, and the recovery is similar in that, the wardrobe analogy, we aren't going to be able to get to a place where, as a society, we are as healed as we need to be. What we've pretty much been speaking about this the entire time, but I would just like to really hone in on it so people remember this series for what we need it to do. What is the impact of sexual violence on women in general? And I'm talking from like a statistical mental illness perspective. I'm talking on it from a perspective of like relation to everyday activities. I'm talking future generations and generational trauma passed down. What is the impact?
You said the mental health stuff first, so I'll start
Mhm.
there, right? The majority will get an acute level of psychological distress. And when I say acute, I mean maybe some anxiety, like sleep difficulties, that kind of thing. That's like a shorter term, right? And then a good proportion as well will then go on to get long-term clinical diagnoses of, say, like a generalized anxiety, depression, substance misuse, or maybe PTSD, or what we now call complex PTSD. So complex PTSD is more commonly known as borderline personality disorder, and it's more prevalent diagnosed in women. And majority of the time they've gone through trauma, and a lot of it is sexual trauma, um, and that's the reason they've changed it to complex PTSD opposed to calling it borderline personality disorder, because that comes with a lot of stigma. And what that means is that a person can then have a real distorted sense of self. They relate in ways to other people that's quite harmful to them, and quite unhealthy. They have difficulties managing their emotions. And then they also as well can have difficulties with like substance misuse, self-harm, that kind of thing. Right. So when we're talking about the psychological impacts, it's not just like your mental health, it's like your sense of self and your identity as well, and your relationships. And that can be, like I said, an acute thing and just happen for a little bit, maybe a few weeks, or it could be a long-term thing that affects your life and can put you into hospital. I've worked in hospitals with women who are experiencing the most severe levels of mental health distress, hearing voices, so psychosis, schizophrenia, like I said, complex PTSD, self-harm, suicide attempts. And if I read their files,
You know
the,
why?
the majority of them gone through sexual violence. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is I didn't want to have to push you to like, be as graphic and as specific, but
Mm,
this is what people don't really get.
yeah.
Men really think that, oh, asking her a few times and, yeah, all right, cool. Like I've actually had, obviously this is in the past years
Mm,
ago, but I've had male friends say, yeah, she told me about a girlfriend that they've got now. Yeah, she told me that like, she didn't really want to do it with him, but like, they did it anyway and whatever. And I just thought, I've probably had sex with the girl and she's felt like that after. Like they can't connect. There's a cognitive dissonance
mm,
that they cannot connect, that just because that girl wasn't your girlfriend,
mm,
just because that isn't someone that you took seriously or whatever, it doesn't mean that you had more rights over her body or you could have made her feel like this and that was okay.
mm,
And it definitely doesn't mean that after she leaves that situation she's fine, she's forgotten about it, and she's like you were.
mm,
No, that is probably going to stick with her, and that is probably going to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate, and then this is what happens. So
yeah.
in society in general, when it comes to mental health issues, and this is again something I've spoken about in previous episodes,
Mm,
the stigmas, we're so quick to have the stigmas and use terms like mental, crazy,
mm,
tapped, blah blah blah, and often it's at women
mm,
and it's men to women
mm,
saying that they had a relationship with her and she's crazy and she's this and she's that, and like as a woman, if you believe that from a man, you've got to have something a bit,
mm,
you're not really in the room, because no woman is just like that.
mm,
No woman has just one day just been crazy.
mm,
It's an accumulation of things that have made her emotionally unhinged.
mm. This is what I mean. Like when I hear things like that, and again, going back to how I think my job should just be how people are in general, is it's not what's wrong with you, it's what
Mm,
happened to you.
mm,
That's the question you should have in your heads. Doesn't happen from nothing. I can promise you that what you're just talking about, that crazy ex-girlfriend,
mm.
right, tends to have been tends to have been like maybe stressed out by the relationship, or maybe previously
Emotionally
abused,
abused.
emotionally abused, and that leads to what we see as quote unquote crazy. So the emotional regulation difficulties, the not being able to communicate, that kind of thing, maybe low self-esteem. What you're seeing on the surface tends not to be what's actually underneath.
Mm,
So I get it. Being confronted with someone that might be shouting at you and all of these things, or I don't know, the person that you see in the street that is, you know, shouting and talking to themselves and hearing voices, that can be really hard. I get it. But I promise you, they're more scared than you are.
Yeah.
I promise you, they're more scared than you are. So take a minute and think what's happened to them instead of saying what's wrong with them.
I think we should end it there. Because that was, I think that is the sentiment that this series has aimed for. I think that is what we wanted to do with this. I think we wanted to change people's perceptions of sexual violence. We wanted to educate people, inform everyone, men and women. And I would urge people, I know I checked my stats on this podcast, the majority of the listeners are women, but this series, if any, you should be forwarding to men. Share with men. Men need to hear this. And men will feel strangely represented by the conversations we've had, because they will remember conversations they've had with their friends or friends have had with them when they're saying the things that we've just quoted back to you, and then they will realize, oh, that wasn't okay, this was what was wrong with that.
No, 100%.
What is anything lasting you want to leave with the listeners?
I guess the main thing would be what I just said, you know, what's happened to someone opposed to what's wrong with them.
How did you get here?
Yeah. Think a little bit about, you know, just showing someone some compassion. Just being a human, listening and believing them. I think that's the absolute basic that anyone can do for someone that they supposedly care about.
What are any resources, books, films, series that you would recommend for people?
Definitely, I May Destroy You. Heavy watch. Baby Reindeer as well. Heavy watch.
Agree.
I think if you're interested in learning a little bit more about my research, you can read my research.
Yeah, don't shy away. Tell us where to find it, honey.
So if you go onto the University of East London research repository, and just type in my name, Amani Milligan, it will come up.
And can you send me the link, because I can put it in the link to this episode?
Yeah, 100%. You can see the whole 219-page document. Sorry, guys.
Why don't you make that into an ebook or something? Are you allowed to do that?
So I am trying to get published, but life. So I'm working on shortening it and
listening
making
now
it.
who are going to be on you about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to get it published in like a journal or something.
Yes, definitely.
But I also appreciate that, not even as an academic, right?
It's not like reading, but at the same time, there's way more boring stuff we all have to read for our jobs. So we might as well be reading that.
Thank you. So you can also read my research. And if you want to learn a little bit more about specifically Black women and Asian women, there are plenty of services out there. I can send you links so you can put them in to the bio. And you can check those out. If you feel like you've been affected by any of the conversations, please, you can reach out to your GP. Or GP can refer you to places, and they can also put in some stuff as well, resources for you to put into the bio. Yeah,
episode. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I would just like to leave everyone with the sentiment that I've been leaving on my mini-sodes, which is that I recommend everybody get therapy. And I don't even mean that in a passive-aggressive way. I mean that straight up and down. We are in a difficult life and society, and just going by the numbers of friends I have alone, as I'm sure you'll attest to, Amani, women on average have experienced some type of brush with some kind of sexual violence. 1 in 5
or something like that.
Yeah. And the more we learn, the more we realise, oh, yeah, that happened to me. So we need to have some help as we navigate that. It's hard enough being a woman of colour, slap on the difficulties. So we should, as a standard, get therapy for free. I'm sorry, but we really should.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
You
but
know,
here we are.
I can't make that change here. But please try to get some therapy, because this is hard stuff that we deal with on a daily basis. And also, if you cannot afford to actually get therapy one-on-one from a therapist, that's totally understandable. But there are other things you can do to become self-aware and to start the self-help journey. And I'm talking, that's reading, that's watching those things that we discussed, and also things that are just more thought provocation, anything that's going to encourage you to have discussions with people and think about things on a deeper level. In my opinion, that's a form of therapy.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to make the changes you
Therapeutic
want.
for sure. I really want to add on to the therapy thing.
Go on, don't worry.
Because I've been hearing a lot of things about like, oh, you know, you have to like heal on your own before you get into a relationship or whatever. We do a lot of healing in relationships. That's
100%.
what is, and a lot of damage in relationships.
100%.
Right? Relationships are the things that tell us about ourselves in the world. That is the only reason you know what you're good at, is because someone has told you
It's
it.
like being with a mirror.
It's literally that, right? So that's why I think the therapy thing can be really helpful for people that have gone through this kind of trauma, because it was a relational trauma and now you need a relationship that can be helpful, and a therapeutic relationship, is helpful if you're with the right person and it's a good therapist. And sometimes, a lot of the time, what I'm doing, it's not the specific technique I'm using, it's just the fact that someone's had a chance to be heard. And that is healing within itself. So
Totally.
don't feel like if again, there's the money barrier. I do understand that. And obviously there's long waiting lists and stuff like that. But don't think that you have to only do self-help.
Yeah.
I think those things are useful, but having a therapeutic relationship can be one of the most powerful things.
100%.
And it's not even because I'm going to teach you a certain skill. It's just because I'm here.
Yeah, and even from speaking from experience, if you listen to my mini-sodes, you'll know I've been in therapy again for about almost 2 months now, and weekly having that person, that conversation with someone who's dedicated to you, has to talk about you. They have to, and they know so much about you, is so healing that it's just there's been so many triggering things that have happened since I started therapy that I haven't reacted to how I normally would. And that's not because I'm saying, you know, she's really good, but I'm not saying it's because she's so good and whatever. I think it's generally just having that 1 hour a week where I can talk just about what I want to talk about. I can let out anything I'm feeling. I can know there's no judgment, no repercussion. She is ready for this. Because, you know, sometimes when you speak to your friends, you don't know what you're laying on top of. They might have had a mad week and they've been telling you they've had a mad week. So now you don't want to message or send them a voice note telling them about your madness. Your partner, you might, you know, it could, whatever you want to talk about might cause an argument. There's a risk there, whatever. Having that person, it does so much for your head that I cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah, no, honestly, I wish we could do a whole series about like therapy.
Well, honey, I mean, your
So I
wish,
could
my
talk it
command.
through, because honestly, yeah, and I'll talk as a professional, right? Being a therapist, you can't really say much to shock me.
Yeah.
But people get quite worried about shocking or scaring or like whatever, and I understand that. There's not much you can say to shock me or scare me. And also, I'm not taking your business anywhere, so you're good.
Nice. Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much, Amani. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, supporters. We really appreciate it. You can find Amani at
Dr. Dr. Amani Samaza, AMANISAMAH. Same on TikTok.
And you know our socials, everything's linked in the bio. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you on the next series. Bye.
Bye.